All right, we'll go ahead and get started, and then folks can continue to join as they may. Welcome everybody tonight. It was kind of a last minute decision, but at least all of you guys got the message that we have decided to continue with the Reaching Out While Locked In series. And we're starting a new process. We've changed the format slightly. We've invited for each of the sessions that are coming up. I think we have it's 8 sessions planned, and we've invited for most of them a researcher to go along with the extension person and give you a little bit of update on what's happening in beef research at UK. As well as an extension program to go along with it that in most cases corresponds to some degree. But tonight's a little bit different because we decided to kick it off with inviting the chair of the Animal and Food Sciences Department, Dr. Richard Coffey, to give us a presentation, kind of bring us up to date. Everybody knows, have probably seen a lot of the information in the papers and everything else about UK taking some pretty severe budget cuts, and unfortunately that has impacted the Animal and Food Sciences Department too. But I don't think it's all doom and gloom, Dr. Coffey, and hopefully you can bring us up to date on kind of where we are and see if anybody has any questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Richard Coffey, the chair of the Animal and Food Sciences Department.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bullock. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with all you folks. Most of you that have been around Kentucky for a while know that I cut my teeth in the Cooperative Extension Service. So when Dare told me I had 15 minutes, that'll be a challenge. It's hard for me to do anything in 15 minutes. But so Dare asked me to talk a little bit just about the state of our department, kind of where we are, and he kind of did a good lead in with some of the budget travails that we are confronted with right now. I thought I'd give you just a quick snapshot of the department, talk a little bit about where we're at from a budget standpoint and how that's really impacting some of the things that we do as a department. So I'm going to jump right into it so I don't run out of time. And I'm happy to answer any questions when we're done. So just some department statistics in general, we currently have 35 total faculty. We have 1 position that is open, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. And depending on the day and how occasionally we'll have a little bit of staff turnover, but not much. We're usually somewhere in the ballpark of about 60 staff. And so those are all folks that are supporting our 3 land grant missions of research, instruction, and then extension. Beef cattle, since this is a beef meeting, I thought I'd highlight just a little bit. It is a major focus for our department. About 28% of our personnel in some way, either wholly or partly, are involved in all things beef cattle. So we have 6 extension specialists, and most of you have probably interacted with all of them at various times. You'll get to learn a little bit more about our 5 research faculty that are doing a lot of research in the beef cattle area. And then we also have 15 support staff. So that includes our staff that work at our 2 beef units that we have, or they're working in one of the labs that we have on campus with some of our research faculty, an extension associate, Ben Kreitz, and then also some folks that work down in our meats lab. So we are very heavily involved in beef cattle, and rightly so, because Kentucky has a huge cattle population. So that's just a quick snapshot of our faculty and staff. Here is where we're located. For those of you that either came through UK or have been on campus, know that we are housed in the concrete silo. Tell everybody if we ever have a tornado, that's the place to be. I'm not sure you could blow that thing down with dynamite. But all of our offices, we have classrooms there. A lot of our analytical labs where our research faculty work are there. Actually, in the basement of that building, we have facilities that we can do some animal research there. We have a meats lab, including an abattoir where we can slaughter or harvest and process meats. And then we have a pretty active food science program with a food science lab in that building as well. We also have a few folks down at Princeton at the new Grain and Forage Center of Excellence. That's where Katie is at, and Kevin as well as folks that work in our beef unit there. So that is where all of our people are located. We do have 7 animal units that support our research, teaching, and outreach efforts. We have 2 beef units, one in West Kentucky at the Research and Ed Center, then at the Seahorn Little Research Center, which is just outside of Versailles. We have a beef unit there, a sheep unit, and a swine unit. And then at what we call the North Farm, which is a little bit north of Lexington, kind of on the trek towards Georgetown, we have a dairy unit, a poultry unit, and a horse unit. And I mention those because they really are key parts of what we do in all 3 of our mission areas. But I'll also tell you, it takes a lot of resources to keep those things functioning and operational. So when I start thinking about budget related items, this is one that comes to the top pretty quick, just because they are fairly expensive to operate. As most of you would probably recognize, these are not set up as profit centers per se. They really are designed to do research, teaching, and outreach, and sometimes those activities aren't always compatible with maximizing profits. So it is something that I have to keep a watch on pretty tightly, just to make sure that we can balance our budget, because I do have to balance those amongst all the other financial obligations that our department has. In terms of our undergraduate population, we are the big player on the block when it comes to contributing to the college's undergraduate teaching mission. We have 2 majors that we are directly responsible for, those being animal science and food science. And then there's a 3rd major, equine science and management, that technically is called a multidisciplinary degree program, but I claim it because we are responsible for probably about 70 to 75% of the instruction. So combined, we generally account for a little over 1/3 of the total college's undergraduate population. So we are very heavily invested there. And one thing that we have seen over time, and I'll show you how that may relate a little bit more in just a second, a lot of our extension faculty, which are starting to teach some. That used to be a little taboo because we wanted our extension folks out in the field as much as possible. But as we've had some constriction of faculty numbers, and as the undergraduate population have grown, we've had to ask some of our extension faculty to help with some of our instructional efforts. So big student numbers for us. We also do a lot of post-baccalaureate training. So whether that's master's degree students, PhD students, or even postdoctoral training, we're generally somewhere in the ballpark of 50 to 60 total. Of those, usually a pretty good blend of master's and PhD. You may kind of notice there's been a little bit of a trend towards a decline in numbers. All of that is heavily driven by grant funding. It's very expensive to train graduate students, both from a stipend and a tuition standpoint, and then just the research activities that go on. So it is very driven by faculty getting grants. And as our faculty numbers have declined, obviously our student numbers from a graduate training standpoint have declined. And also we've probably increased postdoctoral training a little bit over the last 10 years or so, more than we used to. And also we just have fewer faculty. So relative to number of faculty, we still do a good job of training graduate students. So that's just a quick snapshot of some of the department demographics. There's a whole lot more we could talk about. And if you have specific questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them here in a while. But let's talk just a little bit about kind of where we are today. And just like you folks in county offices, or if we have producers, you guys there on your farms, you are feeling lots of direct impacts because of COVID-19 or coronavirus, and we are no exception. Back in about March, the university said, okay, we want to get everybody off campus. And so almost all department employees, with the exception of those that work at our animal units, were sent home and told to work remotely. Some folks can do that a little easier than others. Some, just the nature of the jobs makes it a little difficult to do. but for the most part, most everybody is still working remotely. I'm in the office at least a couple of days a week with a few of my business office staff just to do some of the things that have to happen there. So that's been a huge change. And I don't know about you guys, but I can tell you I am less efficient working from home than I am in my office. There's just so many things that I need to get my hands on. So that's been a little bit of a challenge for us, I believe. The other thing that is a huge impact, our university is in a substantial budget deficit. For those of you that are here in Kentucky, I know the president and the provost send out quite a few emails kind of outlining some of this. Back about a month ago, they sent out some information that at that time, they were saying we were about $74 million in a hole. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sending students home back in mid-March, refunding some of the housing and dining funds that students had paid. A lot, as all of you know, no athletic events are happening, so that's a big source of revenue for the university. Hospital transitioning to treatment of COVID-19 patients and really eliminating elective surgeries and a lot of other things that bring in a lot of revenue just created a huge hole. As a result of that, we have taken a big budget cut. The college was asked to cut 10% out of its budget. The college passed down to departments. We were asked to cut 9.5% of our recurring state budget starting in fiscal year 2021. So starting July 1 of this year, we had to have a plan in place that would cut out 9.5% of our state budget. Just to give you an idea of what that is, our current state budget is about a little over $7.3 million. So a 9.5% cut is just shy of $700,000. The really challenging part of that, most departments and really most land grant universities are probably in about the same boat. As budget cuts have happened over the last 20 years or so, more and more of a department, a university, a college's funds are really tied up in their people in terms of salary, benefits, those kinds of things. So if you just do some rough math, you look at that, if we're having to cut 9.5% of our recurring state budget and 95% of it is tied to people, you kind of know where some of that is going to end up going. So what that meant for us is we had to cut almost $700,000 out of that. So what that will ultimately mean for us, we are going to lose 2 faculty positions. One of those is an open faculty position that we had that had been open for a while that we had not filled for a host of reasons. And then we actually had another faculty member decide that they were going to retire, and that is another faculty line that we will give up. And then we're also losing 3 staff positions. Some other areas that are going to be impacted by that budget cut, we have a pool of funds that we use as a department to help with some graduate student stipends. That has been reduced. Something that's going to really impact everybody in our department is we were forced to reduce some of our recurring operating funds that really weren't allocated anywhere. They were dollars that were there that I could shuffle in a variety of ways just to fill gaps in places. So I can tell you that is a substantial cut for us to have to deal with. And the other thing that really scares me, I don't think our economy is going to recover in a 12-month time frame, so it's not going to be surprising to me if we aren't asked to make another cut this next year. So I'm a little concerned. Well, I'm very concerned about that, just to be really honest. So in terms of our 3 mission areas, what has COVID done? It has had some major impacts on how we are currently doing undergraduate instruction. As I mentioned earlier, students were sent home about mid-semester in March. And so for the last half of this spring semester, we had to move all of our instructional efforts fully online. So that was a daunting task. Number one, just to help all of our teaching faculty get set up with the technology, the equipment they would need to do that. Took a little while to get set up. But I can tell you our faculty did yeoman's work and really transitioned to that fairly quickly. The university is planning to open the campus back up in the fall to students with what they are calling a new normal, but they're also telling us be prepared if we need to go back to 100% online instruction. So still a lot of uncertainty with what the fall is going to look like and how we're going to get students back on campus, still practice social distancing. We know we will likely be limited in numbers of students that we can have in a classroom at any one time. So how we arrange all of that, I know the university is still looking at a lot of that, and we're being asked to start making some of those plans as well. So really some substantial challenges. And in all honesty, for a major like ours, and I think this is true for most of what we do in the College of Ag, Food, and Environment, we are very hands-on with both a lot of our lecture materials, but particularly with our labs. For us, we like to do a lot of that out on our farms, get students' hands dirty, working with animals, and there is no way you can replicate some of that online. So we are really being challenged to come up with ways to meaningfully provide quality education, knowing that we can't get those students some of the activities that we think are critically important. And for me, and I know all of our instructors would agree with this, I think this is even more critical today as fewer and fewer of our students are actually coming from farm backgrounds. So to get them prepared for the workforce, we really need those hands-on things as much as possible. The other thing that I'm afraid may happen this fall is we could see a reduced number of students enrolling. I think across the university, the college, and even our department, just as students recognize they're going to have to be online, and they may just say, I'm going to lay out a semester and see if things will get back to normal so that I can have the same kind of educational experience I had prior to COVID-19. So if that happens, if we see reduced enrollment, I think that is going to just further magnify the budget issues that we're going through right now. Now, this is not a COVID-19 item, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it. We did have a group called a beef task force that was meeting and really taking a look at all things beef oriented that we do as a department in conjunction with a lot of our industry partners. And one of the really neat things from an instructional effort that kind of grew out of that we're starting to take a look at, and we will likely move in the direction of doing, is within our animal science major trying to develop some beef-oriented certificate programs. Things like students have an interest in cow-calf management, maybe have a certificate program there, maybe in stocker calf management, just a variety of things. So that's something that's kind of exciting for us to think about going forward. In terms of research, same kind of thing. When everybody got sent home, a lot of our research activities had to stop. Couple of problems with that. Most grant funds that faculty get, they are time dependent, both in terms of you have so much time to spend those dollars, and plus just it takes time to do research. And so as that has got curtailed, there's concerns about will we have enough grant funds to really finish out some projects. It also is adding time for our graduate students to complete degrees. And again, will we have sufficient funding for stipends for this added time, as well as tuition costs and some of those. We have been able to restart what is called essential research, and I won't bore you with what some of that means, but we still have to have in place procedures that protect our lab technicians, our farm staff, and graduate students, and all those that are working in that research arena. Plans are currently underway with the Vice President of Research, trying to really figure out how do we phase in the restart of our entire research enterprise. So again, that's another part of what we do that really has been impacted. In terms of outreach extension, this is another one that has been strongly impacted by COVID-19. Immediately out of the gate, travel wasn't absolutely banned other than out of state, but within state, it was strongly discouraged. And I know that was true for a lot of you down at the county level as well. Certainly been true for our specialists. So So face-to-face meetings were something that wasn't allowed. So if you've been like me, I have had more Zoom meetings than I ever knew I would need to do in my lifetime. Uh, I will say this time has created an opportunity for us to figure out new ways to reach clientele. And I think this webinar series that our beef extension guys have done is one way of doing that. And while that's been good in the interim, this next bullet put on there, and this is something I truly believe, and I felt that when I was in the extension world, and I believe it now as a chair, I truly believe that effective extension work is absolutely relational. And by that, I mean, it has a lot to do with being face-to-face with people, whether it's in a face-to-face county or regional meeting or on their farm. And so I really believe as quick as we are able to, we are going to need to transition back to that as much as possible. But a caveat with that is there is no doubt the budget cut and some of the budget issues that we have could have some impact on how much travel we're able to do, and even maybe some of the programming that we're able to do. So we are going to have to look at new funding streams if we're going to try and maintain things at the same level we had prior to COVID-19. So again, those are some things that I know our beef guys are looking at and that I'm looking at as a department chair. Just to kind of wrap things up, just a few final thoughts. I do think anytime you have challenges like this, you can use it as a way to really evaluate where you are. And so I think this is going to help us, or maybe even force us, to better define what are we doing and what should we be doing. So I think those are some good conversations that may grow out of the situation we find us in. One thing that I do know, I think we as a department, and I think this is true for our college, we are going to find new ways and innovative ways to fulfill our missions of teaching, research, and outreach. We are going to figure out how to do quality education for our students, whether that's on campus, face-to-face, or doing it remotely. Even though there will be some things that we just can't do, I think we will figure out innovative ways to make that a quality experience for those students. Same thing on the research side. We are going to figure out how to safely start that back up so that we can continue developing new knowledge that is going to ultimately have impact for our stakeholders at the farm level. And I truly believe this because we have outstanding folks in our extension ranks that our outreach is going to remain relational, service-oriented, and impactful. So yes, it's a challenging time, but challenges often create opportunities. So I'm convinced we will figure out how to do that. So with that, I'm going to stop. I think I probably went a little over my 15 minutes, but like I said, I come from the extension world and it's impossible for me to do much better than that from a time standpoint. So Dare, I'll turn it back to you. I don't know if you want to do questions now or wait and do them later.
Yep, we'll go ahead and see what we have now, and I do appreciate it, Dr. Coffey. And we have a question from Charles Trumbo. He's one of our guests from actually down at Georgia, so he may be interested in this himself. Will you guys open up to having more graduate online agricultural degrees in the future? And he was also curious about the certificate program, if that was going to be fully offered online.
Yeah, the graduate training side, that's something we have talked about as a college for a long time. We do have a degree program that's really kind of in its infancy stages now. In fact, some of our beef guys are actually involved in that. So yes, I think that is something that we as a college will grow in. But like I say, we're still pretty much in our infancy stages. The certificate thing, that's really more at the conversational stage right now. I think the way things have worked out with COVID-19 and figuring out how to do a lot of this stuff online in meaningful ways may lend itself to us making some of these courses that are going to be a part of these certificate programs available online. But I also believe, just because the nature of our major, that they're probably going to be pretty heavy lab oriented as well, that may be a little more difficult to get online. but our university, just like others, I mean, I visit with a lot of other chairs. There are major efforts underway to get as much of what we do online from an instructional standpoint as possible. So I do see us moving that direction. We'll just have to see how all that fleshes out.
All right, sounds good. One other thing, if you don't mind, Dr. Coffey, just so we don't leave completely on the doom and gloom budgetary wise, but we did actually this year have a couple of our extension programs through the Ag Development Fund come through, and also Beef has been extremely fortunate, I guess, in our relationship with KBN and KCA in terms of we've actually maintained pretty good funding even through some pretty hard times over the last 15, 20 years. So didn't know if you wanted to make
Oh,
any comments
absolutely.
on that.
Yeah, that is huge for us. In all honesty, if it were not for some of our extension faculty, like our beef group, being so active and so progressive when it comes to a lot of the programming that they're doing, and being able to find funding, for example, some of that comes through KBN, through the Ag Development Board, it would be almost impossible for us to do all the important things that we do. So, I mean, my hats are off to our beef extension guys in particular. For the way they have progressively developed programs that are multidisciplinary, that are collaborative, that really provide meaningful things that impact our cattle producers, because it has opened up a lot of funding opportunities for them. And like Dare said, we just in the last couple of months have had two major new programs funded through the Ag Development Board, things that are ultimately going to be extremely impactful to a lot of our cattle producers in the cattle industry. So yeah, even again, challenges are times for opportunities, and I think they have fully taken advantage of those.
All right. If anybody has any further questions for Richard, please just type those in the chat. Remember, we don't have the opportunity for you guys to unmute yourselves, so we need to handle questions in that manner, if you guys don't mind, and we'll keep an eye on those and get those answered at the end.